There's what we say, and then there's what we don't. And often it's the unspoken that holds the most power. Welcome to the Unspoken Edge, a space where hidden dynamics, quiet tensions, and unacknowledged truths are named, held, and turned into grounded action. I'm Rachel Keck, coach, facilitator, and founder of Mosaic Collaborative. I work with visionary leaders who want growth that's sustainable, relational, and real. Here, we explore what's beneath the surface, the energy under leadership, the patterns, resistance, and the truth shaping how we lead and live. In every episode, we'll name what's missing, hold what's tense, and follow the thread to what's real. Because clarity creates traction, and legacy, it's not just what you leave behind, it's how you lead today. Let's begin. Hello, everyone. Today we have Dave Komar on the podcast. Dave and I met
Yeah, it was right during COVID.
I launched Mosaic Collaborative in 2020, and I was getting known for culture, and you were in the culture space, and everybody's like, oh, you got to meet Dave. What I love about you, Dave, is that we do come from these very different places, but we align on so much. And so I'm really excited about the conversation today. Will you tell everybody who you are, what you do, what you want them to know about you?
Yeah, so as Rachel mentioned, retired Army Brigadier General, been retired since November of 2018 here in Kansas City, Missouri. Originally from Central New York State, a career of a little over 31 years in the Army, lived all over the U.S. and overseas as well. And a lot of those experiences really shaped how I view culture and how I believe that leaders can build great culture within their organization.
Okay, I wanted to have some questions about that. So you were in the military for 31 years, got out in 2018, not too long after the world kind of went a little crazy. When you're already trying to transition, will you just share a little bit about that transition from, being this career in the military to coming into the civilian world?
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges is trying to translate what it is you did in the military so that it's easier for people to understand and make comparisons to some of their experiences in the private sector. It's certainly an adjustment as far as sort of what's expected of you, what you can expect of other people. But one thing that I think remains a constant, has always been a constant, is that leadership is leadership,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the context within which you lead. The things that are important to people and the elements of great leadership, I believe are the same.
And people are people, really.
Yeah, that's
So,
right. That's
you know,
right.
what do
No,
you,
you're absolutely right.
whether they have a uniform on or not, they're still people. So,
That was one of the great things about serving in the Army. Is the U.S. Army is one of the most diverse organizations in the world. We've got 1.2 million people in the organization from all walks of life, and being able to meet those people and learn from them and understand some of their experiences and background, not only incredibly useful, it's incredibly rewarding, because I believe everyone has a great story in them. I've found it to be the truth as I got to know and learn more about people that I served with.
what do you think was the biggest gift that you got from those 31 years in the military?
Literally meeting thousands of people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all had very, very different reasons for joining the military and had different goals, what they wanted to achieve in the military. So that was by far the biggest gift.
Mm-hmm. I can only imagine the legacy that you left. So let's get to the question of the day for you. Dave, what is something unspoken that's quietly shaping how you lead, decide, connect with others lately? Something that once acknowledged has revealed a deeper part of your legacy in the making.
That's a fantastic question. My answer to that really has to be sort of where I am in life, realizing that I am getting along in years, and the number of years that I have left to be able to help other people and to make a positive impact on other people, trying to be more serious about that and be more purposeful, whether it's professionally or personally with my family. I think it's really important, and that's one of the things that really that shapes me is realizing that, not to sound morbid, but death is undefeated
Mhm.
in this world, and as you get older, you lose parents, you lose friends. I think it should give you cause to sort of reflect on what's most important and what it is you want to do with the rest of your life. I think that's probably one of the biggest influences.
I don't think it's something that we talk about collectively. Well, and it is such a legacy conversation, right? It does bring up what well, it brings up what do I want to leave behind? I think it's such a deeper question. So when you think about the legacy that is most important to you, what does that look like?
I think for me, the most important thing that I can leave behind in legacy you know, is is really in people's minds that they've learned something from me, either professionally or personally, and that they thought that I treated them well. I think that's probably one of the most important things to me is being kind to people and trying to understand as best you can what they're going through. Building and continuing to build that empathy for everyone that I deal with.
What is so interesting about legacy is that it requires us to be honest about reality. Like you said, nobody wins against death. And that requires this level of honesty and reality. I feel like there's this band of like success in life where when you're in that band, it feels like you have cheated this like okay, let me not move too much because I think if I don't move too much I can like cheat the system or something. If you are below that band, then you really don't have anything to lose. If you're above that band, it feels like you're so comfortable that you're like kind of fearless, right? But there's this band that people live in that they're not really honest. Does that
No, I
resonate with
guess
you?
it does a little bit. It goes back to an exercise that I did online in a seminar that was run by Donald Miller. He's the author of Building a Story Brand, Marketing
Yeah.
Made Simple, Business Made Simple, and he's since written a book. I believe it's called Hero on a Journey. It's about the
Mm.
hero's journey in their life and what parts of the exercise. In fact, it's the very first thing you do is you write your eulogy.
Mhm.
What do you want people to say about you?
Yeah.
And I think a legacy that's going to stand the test of time in the memory of those people who you helped along the way.
It's that presence with those people
Hmm.
that really matter. We know people are people. Leadership is leadership. When you think about the leadership that you exercised in the military, what do you feel are the top leadership skills?
I think first and foremost, you've got to understand yourself. You've got to know what your strengths are, what areas are not as strong for you, and seek help and in those areas, and or surround yourself with people who are strong in those areas and can advise you. That's first and foremost. The Army's first principle of leadership is know yourself and seek self improvement.
Mm,
Then you got to what makes other people tick, and it's different for every single individual, and that's what makes leadership so challenging. There's no one size fits all type of solution in any situation. Can I tailor the situation to different people that have different needs, sometimes putting them in a specific position. Jim Collins talks about getting the right people in the right seats. because people do have different abilities, do have different strengths, and being able to identify what those are and put them in a position that they can capitalize on those strengths, not only for themselves, but for the entire organization.
One advantage I feel like the military has that we don't have in business is that they consider the whole person. In business, you just expect them to show up for their job and do the work. In the military, it's the housing, the like, what's the parenting plan? Like there's more consideration of this person's whole life and how
Yeah,
that's impacting.
yeah, I think certainly, and it just make it more complex. Because you can't just treat people based on how they show up at work. You have to realize that there are other issues, complexities in their lives, and some of which are difficult to understand or at least to appreciate unless you've been through them. I'll give you an example in my case, having children. So my wife and I, we had our own children. I tried as best I could to understand, but it is difficult unless you had that experience. Probably one of the most profound, experiences in life. But I think there's analogies to that situation all throughout other people's lives. Is that you're not going to experience everything that they have experienced or are experiencing. So you do your best to understand what they're going through. Now, the organization, you're still responsible for the organization accomplishing its mission. That's got to be right up there with the care of your people, because without your people, you're not going to get the mission done. The nation's counting on you to get that mission done.
Mhm. Yeah, which is why I love that the first thing is know yourself.
It would be interesting if there was a way at the end that you could score yourself on, how well did I understand myself?
How do you define I'm how do you define culture? We talked about leadership and the knowing yourself and knowing others, and, like, that's critical,
Mhm.
right? You show up. But how do you define culture, and what do you think is the biggest driver?
The way I define culture is the sum of the experience that people who either work within your organization or work with your organization, what they experience. So that's everything from a customer. How are they greeted when they get there? Employees in the organization, how do they speak with each other? How do they relate to each other? Is the company very clear on, hey, this is what people should expect from the company, from the company's leadership, and this is what the company and the company's leadership should expect from everybody in the organization. So to me, it's the sum of that experience of people
Interesting.
inside the organization or people who work with that organization.
How I describe culture is how we do things. So it's not so much the outcome of although, I mean, now you've got me thinking about the experience of it. When I talk about what culture is, I talk about it's how we do things. It's the decisions we make. It's what we prioritize. It's how we interact. It's the relationships and what the relationships look like. It's how we go about every day.
Well, I think that's a huge part of that. I think what can be missed with that description is how that impacts the people within that organization. You could
Yeah.
treat people a certain way, but each individual in that organization, they're going to experience something a little bit different from that. So that's why I use the definition that I do use, that I've been developing probably for 40 years now. What are the most important elements? First and foremost, it's purpose.
Mhm.
What's the purpose of the organization? I used to have an old boss, General Dave Perkins. He'd go into an organization, he'd ask the question, what are you for?
Mm. I
Not
love
what do you
questions.
do?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, what you do is it's interesting, certainly, but what are you for? Why do you exist? How are you supporting either the larger organization outside of your part of the organization, or how are you supporting and how do you serve the people outside your organization? So that's first and foremost for me is purpose. The next most important thing is the leader, and the leader, in very specific terms, in a company that would be the CEO. And the reason that individual is so important, it's not because they don't need all the other uh, leaders in that in that company to help support the culture, and they don't need the employees to, but they control the resources. They set the priorities and control the resources. I get asked this question all the time. If you're not a CEO, can you still build great culture? And my answer is absolutely. You can have positive impact on the culture, and you're part of that organization. But understanding you're still going to be influenced and impacted by the rest of the organization. Now, what I tell people is, if you create this, this cell of great culture within a company, people are going to see that. Leaders in other parts of the larger organization are going to, see what you've built there and say, how do you do that? How did you do that? How do we do that? And the next is people. What types of people do you need to build the culture you're trying to build within your organization? I get asked all the time, what's the best culture?
Mm.
And the answer for me is very simple. Best culture is the culture that everyone in your organization loves and people that work with your organization cherish.
Yeah. It's the culture
So,
that gets things done for you.
right. If you were to go, I use this example all the time, but if you go to, an advertising agency, their culture is
Mm.
very, very different than an organization that say runs nuclear power plants. You know, not a lot of craft beer and hacky sack going on
Yeah.
at the nuclear power plant.
Right.
And I take great comfort in that, actually. And
Yeah.
different people want different things from work.
Yes.
Some people love competition and they want to be in an organization that uh, supports competition within the organization. There's some people that want to work, with the absolute most cutting edge technology.
Right.
It's building the culture that you need to advance your strategy.
Yeah, I something that I learned with the company you're with now and the technology that you use, what I learned yesterday is that you don't compare. There's not a comparative of what your cultural assessment is versus other companies. And that struck me, and I thought, well, of course. I mean, I hadn't never thought of that before. Like, it doesn't make any sense to compare your culture to other. That is the beauty. It's just owning it. It goes back to your number one leadership principle. Know yourself. Just own it and be really clear and honest about it.
It's back to the example of children. You would think that two people passing on the same genes to two or three different children, that the children would turn out exactly the same, raised in the same environment. You'd think, oh, they're going to turn out the same. And you and I had this discussion. How's that working out for you?
Yeah,
You know, they're just
it's
very,
so
very
true.
different. And that's what makes life great, is that, everyone is an individual and is different.
Mm.
And you'll have two companies that are in the same industry that are both successful that have different cultures. I've seen it time and again in the Army where you have two organizations side by side. They have the same equipment. They have the same people in general with the same skills. All the leaders have gone through the same leadership training and have similar experience. They're both very successful, but the cultures are different. I think there's a lot of danger in trying to compare your organization, your company's culture to other cultures.
I wanna sit with your definition of culture as an experience because and what the impact is. I mean, wanna add a little bit of an outcome
Hmm.
definition to mine. Are the outcomes what you want them to be? Like, because you could have two completely different
Hmm.
things, and if they're both super impactful and they're both having the outcome that you want, and people are happy, they're clear, they understand, there's no right way. The right way is that people are clear and they understand and are like,
You look at two technology companies. Look at, for instance, uh, Microsoft and Google, both historically very successful companies with two very different cultures. You tend to have people that are drawn towards Microsoft, that have one set of desires and what they're looking for in a workplace. And then you have another set of people that are drawn to Google and, the way they do things in their organization and the way they treat people, and, et cetera, what that experience is like. And certainly, you talked about how we do things. You know, my fourth element of culture is process. How do
Mhm.
you do things? Is it aligned with what you're trying to achieve? If you if you're a CEO of a company and you say, hey, I want to push decision making down to the lowest level possible, and then you go inside that organization and you see that people are very risk averse to making decisions, and just keep pushing them up the chain, so that they don't really have to bear the responsibility for what that decision is. Then you're not achieving the culture that you're trying to achieve. Do they need to fill out a form and get 3 different people to sign off on it? How are you doing things within that organization? One of the biggest problems I've found in organizations, whether it's in the military or in the private sector, is a lack of understanding on almost everybody's behalf of what decisions they're allowed. There's variations, you know, but everyone in an organization should know, even someone on the first day on the job, first week on the job, what decisions am I allowed to make by myself? What decisions am I responsible for or allowed to make? But I have to inform my supervisor of the decision that I made, because it may have other impacts. What decisions do I have to consult with my supervisor with before I make that decision? And then what decisions am I not allowed to make? What decisions have been reserved, at a higher level that I can inform. I can give my thoughts, my recommendations on how that decision ought to go based on my perspective, but I'm not allowed to make that decision.
Yeah.
And very few people can give you a list of those.
Can be clear about that. Which again goes back to your number one leadership of know yourself and what you're cascading.
Hmm.
Um, because a lot of times you can't, people can't answer that. And it's not a malicious or a conscious thing. It's just either micromanagement has been cascaded,
Hmm.
or lack of clarity, or I mean, there's a number of things that why that happens, but
Right. And most misunderstandings, most issues in companies really revolve around that fifth element of culture, that I identified, which is communication. And I'm not just talking about, hey, make sure you talk to people, but you have to be very purposeful. How do you intend to communicate throughout your organization? Both from the top down, from the bottom up, as well as horizontally within the organization. Are you going to use Slack or some other messaging application at certain levels and for certain purposes? How does the CEO plan on communicating to the rest of the C-suite and throughout the organization? Does the CEO, do they plan on holding a town hall every month, plus having a sort of a electronic bulletin board, or an actual bulletin board, depending upon how your company does business? If you're a manufacturing company and a good portion of your people within the organization are out on a production line or something like that, they're not using chat, they're not using email. So how are you communicating with them? And again, it can't be left to chance or good intentions. It has to be planned.
yeah,
There has to be a plan.
intentional communication is so true, and it is so overlooked. So much is going on that it's like, okay, now tell everybody that the cascading
Yeah,
of messages can be so hard. Uh,
your purpose has to drive everything.
yeah,
You have to have a compelling purpose in your organization. Can't just be, well, we want to create the best value for our customers. Guess what? You're in trouble, because your employees can do that almost anywhere.
yeah, yeah.
I've got a friend of mine. He was the CEO of a brush company, making brushes that you see on street sweepers, and those long horizontal brushes that you see where they use to clear airfields and parking lots and things like that. And the purpose of their company that he worked and developed, it wasn't to make the best brush or be most efficient in building brushes. The purpose of their company was eh, to help people get home safely to their families every day.
Mm,
Okay,
mm,
that's a compelling, that's a purpose.
yeah.
That's a purpose that people are going to say, man, I can't wait to get up and help people get home safely to their families today.
Yeah. Well,
That's
that goes back to the eulogy for me.
right, right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of times, and you've probably experienced this too, you go into a company and they may even have a really compelling purpose, but they have forgotten to have their people think about their own compelling purposes. And so
Hmm.
there's some misalignment. I mean, there's always going to be misalignments because we're all different people and we have different
Hmm.
priorities. To really make some space to invite people into the company purpose, but to invite them into their own compelling purpose is such a gift. I mean, talk about effective culture. Like,
Hmm.
that's huge. That's
No,
huge.
absolutely.
Is there anything else, Dave, before we wrap this up? Anything else you want to add to this conversation?
No, I would just encourage folks to get in touch with me if they'd like to speak more about culture and not just in general terms, but in very practical, concrete terms of how do I build that great culture. That's the focus of my book, Conquer Your Culture. It's not another book about why culture is important and why we should care. I can't add anything to that. I mean, I think John Maxwell's co-written like 80 books, most of them around leadership and culture. And there's a whole slew of people like him. But there's not a lot of out there is how do you actually do it? And that's why I wrote my book, is because when I was put in charge of my first organization in the Army, I knew I wanted to build great culture because number one, it's the right thing to do for your people. And number two, I knew that the organization would be more effective with a great culture, but I didn't know how to do it. So I've spent the last 35 years figuring out, developing a methodology that allows anybody, wherever they are in an organization, to build the best culture they can, given the resources available.
How can people find you, Dave?
Yeah, the easiest way is on LinkedIn. I think there's only like one or two other David Komars, and one of them owns a women's clothing um, company. But if you look and next to my profile, you'll have the
Awesome.
cover of my book, Conquer Your Culture. And please reach out. And I know you'll have my email in the show notes, but it's dkomar, Komar, at executivedevelopment.com.
Awesome. I love this conversation. I love our conversations, actually.
No, a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Thank
Really, really, really get me thinking, Rachel. I appreciate that.
you.
Our guests bring such clarity and depth. If you want to explore more of their work, you'll find links in the show notes. And thank you, listener, for joining me on the Unspoken Edge, the place where we name what's missing so you can lead from what matters. If something resonated with you today, share this episode with a friend or a colleague. Leave a review or subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you're navigating unseen tensions in your leadership or culture, let's connect. You'll find me at mosaiccollaborative.com, because legacy isn't a final chapter, it's what you live into, one conversation at a time.